Hello, everyone, and welcome to our last session for the Defending the Grid track, and appreciate having such a good crowd here on a Thursday here right before it. All of you are thinking you're going to win a car, and that's wonderful. One of you will, right? So anyway, thank you for your time. We got a great group today. We have Dean Weber of Mocana and Mark Peterson of GE Power, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dean, and thank you.
Morning, everybody. My name is Dean Weber. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Mocana. Mocana builds a security platform based on a services backend and a software component out on the endpoint, either as binary or as source code. And what we're going to be talking about today is how DNP3 has been able to use some of that architecture to secure the transactional components of DNP3. The whole idea here is about protecting legacy devices. Again, if you're talking about modern protocols, there's already a lot of work being done on modern protocols. This is primarily in older legacy environments, or what we commonly refer to as Brownfield. So the idea here is that what can we do as we are preparing to migrate to new platforms and we are preparing to upgrade our existing infrastructure, how do we start someplace with the Brownfield environments that we have? And I tend to break that up into two more categories: brownfield upgradable areas where we can make changes to the existing infrastructure, and brownfield non-upgradable areas where we can't make changes. The only real option there is to either accelerate the replacement or to put something in front of those devices, like a gateway. So again, Mocana's been around since 2002, came out of building lightweight crypto for DoD and various other components of the United States government. Needless to say, we've been doing this a long time. And the whole idea about how do we get to somebody like a GE is we partner with GE on solving some of the thornier problems around cryptographic transport, around secure elements, around how do you use trust anchorage, all of those kinds of functions that come into play when we start talking about secure comms. So I think this is kind of self-explanatory. It's not getting any better out there. We continue to see more maliciousness coming out of the code developers. We see more persistence. We see more nation-state near-peer actors becoming involved. And we see the trickle down to non-nation-state near-peers occurring more quickly, meaning that people are getting their hands on more sophisticated code more often. And as you can see from the timeline, this is not anything new. If you were here for the earlier panel, it's not when, it's if, or excuse me, it's not if, it's when that you're going to be attacked. Whether they are successful or not, you're going to be attacked. It's just that simple. Why are we having these problems? Because in the OT world, we've relied on safety as job one for many, many years. Safety as job one is still a very important thing to do. We're not saying deviate from that. We're saying add to it. There's a cyber aspect. There's a resiliency aspect. You heard earlier about a restart aspect. All of these things are important to take into consideration. But one leg of this stool isn't enough. You've got to address a lot of them. And again, we're here to talk about security as a function. So as we move into wanting more data being distributed to more consumers, which is generally what's driving the interconnect between IT and OT, we see that those vulnerabilities in the IT world are starting to come and bear fruit in the OT environments. And if you look at the IT environments, what they've primarily done is they have settled into using IT-centric security controls, which are in many cases just not appropriate for OT environments. The protocols are not understood by IT security appliances. There's lots of work being done there. I'm not here to say that all is doom and gloom, but in general, IT security controls are being bypassed because of the distributed nature of the OT environment. In the IT world, we had a perimeter. In the OT world, we didn't start with a perimeter, and we aren't going to get one anytime soon. So how does one address that? And that's part of what we're going to be talking about today. The ICS devices are also not designed, in many cases, with security in mind. They were designed with safety in mind. And as you probably are well aware, we relied on those safety systems above all else to resolve our problems. If there was a failure, of any level inside our operational technology environments, we relied on our safety systems to either overcome that fault or to force a normal shutdown. And as we've been hearing more and more, the safety systems themselves, since they have the same vulnerabilities as the primaries, are also being attacked. And I think it won't be long before you start seeing coordinated attacks between primaries and secondaries. If you look at the Triconic stuff, that didn't happen, but it was purely by operator error. Had the operator done it the right way, that particular environment would have been damaged. As it turns out, because the attack on the safety system went first before the primary, the safety system triggered an analog shutdown as opposed to a normal shutdown. So lots of vulnerabilities exist in these environments. Again, greenfield, we can do a much better job with new technologies coming to bear. But you've got trillions of dollars worth of embedded infrastructure. It's not going away anytime soon. What can we do with the older stuff? Okay, this is primarily where we're talking about today, is around the protocols themselves. And so there's a lot of them, right? DNP is one of, I think, 32 registered transport protocols that we track. So everything from OPC-UA to DNP3 to SIP to, I mean, take your poison today. Lots of information protocols. We're here today to talk about DNP3 specifically, because that's more relevant to this audience than some of the others. But at the end of the day, they're all vulnerable. So we've got to do something about all of them. And at that point, I think I'm going to turn this over to Mark.
Thank you. A couple things I wanted to get out of the way. First of all, here we are talking about implementing an advanced version, secure function on DNP, which has been around for a long time. But my gosh, you got to think how much work has been done by all the technical committees over the years and the development of the DNP. I mean, I remember in the early 90s, Westronic, and they started talking about, hey, what's this new universal protocol? And they started mentioning the DNP and started playing with the DNP1, first implementation. So we've come so far. I just wanted to show some appreciation for all the people who developed all this stuff over the years. And then when we talk about the secure version, all the work, again, that's going on in the technical committees to come up with that implementation. Specifically Grant, no, because Grant was on the West Front when I was doing up there for an FAT. You probably don't remember it, but you were there and you were telling me about this and where we're going with it. So it's been a long time. We've known each other a long time, and honestly, doing a presentation discussing DNP Secure up here, I kind of feel like I'm showing off a stick drawing while I've got a Rembrandt in the audience. So, okay, no, very much appreciation for all you've done, sir. So, and then something else I wanted to note. The presentation was originally created by Greg Lamar. Greg was unable to be here, so I'm filling in his stead, which is quite a big pair of shoes to fill. So just wanted to give him credit for the work he did for developing this. So, and another thing I was intending, as I understood it, these sessions were concurrent. So then I thought I had a good 45 minutes to spill a bunch of information to you. But in lieu of that, since we're short here, my goal is to tell you what we've done, what we've worked with Mocana to implement on our platform, and really to show you just how easy it is to implement that new feature. The technical pages, I'm going to defer to Grant. Gladly and comfortably, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to bounce through a lot of these pages. So forgive me while I'm jumping through them so quickly, but that's the reason I'm doing that. So here I am starting off. First thing I'm going to do is start passing through here, and let's get down to how we've implemented it. Not to steal from you, but just to give a basic overview of the functionality. A lot of people ask, oh, so secure DNP, encryption. Well, no, it's authentication. So the core action of what happens is a sender wants to send a message. They will take their message. They will run a hash function on it. And then that hashed result is called a MAC. And then the sender will send that MAC and their message to the end device. End device will take the message and apply the same hash algorithm, create their own local MAC, do a comparison. If they agree, that has authenticated the user. The user who they think is sending that is the one they think. So it's confirmed. The other thing it does is it will ensure that the message was not modified in transit. So this doesn't happen every time in all the polls. You'll have traditional polls and responses going on, controls and confirmations coming back, but the receiving device has the option to issue a challenge. And challenge response is one of the core mechanisms of how this works. So the receiving device will say, hey, I want you now, with this particular message you sent me, confirm who you are. And so you go through that process. So that's the core method of how this is done, with a lot more details to expand upon it. So, and this graphic, and I assume that all the PDF will be provided for this. So the details that I'm bouncing over, you can look at those a little later when we bring them in. So, what are companies concerned with? When do we need to implement this? We need a mechanism to implement it. And how easy is it? What's it going to cost me? How difficult is it going to be is it going to be to do that at a station? So what we've done, I'm going to take a typical configuration from a classic RTO. This one supports pre-shared keys. Now, I know I'm getting a little bit ahead of the technical. I wish we had been swapped so you could get some of this background information. But the hash I was talking about, the algorithms to do that, they have to be the same on both ends so that they can communicate, obviously, and interpret each other. And so there are update keys and session keys. The update keys are the wholly private keys that are shared between the sender and the receiver outside of the communication path with the RTU. So that's done by some other means. Those wholly update keys are utilized to create session keys, which are updated periodically based on different conditions. When we want to actually implement this, we don't want, what customers get scared of is they think, my gosh, do I have to recreate my RTU? Am I going to have to give up my existing configuration and start over? You start over with a new config. When you commission, you're going to have to redo everything. So what we've done is we've taken the tool that is needed from Mocana and we've integrated that with our configuration tool. So as an example, if someone has an existing configuration, they can take that configuration and they upgrade it to a new version of firmware, which includes the secure portion of the DNP. They can choose to implement that or not. Everything else that they've done up to that point is the same. And so when it comes time to commission, everything is going to be business as usual, except for that additional secure functionality. So our hopes in that regard is that they're going to see that consistency in what they've already done, and then it came across under the new system, and they don't have to go through a full-blown recommissioning. Now, for a practical feel for what that implementation takes, firmware upgrade, 10 to 20 minutes on an RTU. An upgrade of the configuration, probably 10 to 15 minutes. And then we have many default settings that would, you could probably be off and running quite well. Default settings with regard to the security settings. And then you can expand on that from there if you wish. So now these tables, some of you are going to be thinking, what in the world is this? Some of you are going, oh yeah, I live and dream that for years. So I'm not going to go to detail column by column, but the table that you see at the top is the grand config table for the DNP server application in a D20. And so it has particular settings that are applicable to each instance of the server. And then there's one column we added, security settings. When you click on that, now you open up the additional tables that we provided that are applicable to the secure connection. And from there, you can go through and choose what algorithms you want to use, what functions you insist on challenging. There are default ones, and then you have the option to apply to insist that the challenge response be done on other functions as well. And then there are other tables where you choose how often and when the session keys will be updated. So, you look at this, again, if you're not familiar with it, you're going to be seeing those tables and think, well, what's the significance of this? Like I said, bring your config over and then turn on the secure version of DNP on instances to which you want to apply it, and then start with the defaults, and then pick and choose and tweak that per your particular installation and needs. So, how am I doing on time, girl? Okay, man, it goes quick. Okay. And then, remember I told you, we do pre-shared keys with our implementation. So, I generate a key using a third-party tool, and I put that in the front-end device, and then we have a mechanism in the RTU where you can put that in. At this time, we don't have a means of doing key distribution. That is definitely on the list, something we have to pursue. You think about that. 300-400 RTUs, and you're going to manually update these keys, it becomes a nightmare. So that's something, and the DNP committees are working on that now, and I'm sure Grant will address that. So once you do the configuration, of course, what's next you need to do? Oh, I'm sorry.
So you're using symmetric cryptography for this?
No. Well, it depends how you say that. We put the same, we share the keys manually. So, it's not like we're using a PKI where we're doing it from one end. So you have to do them ahead of time. But you have to define the same key update algorithm in both ends. And then you have to identify what malc algorithm you're using. They don't have to match on both ends. So by having the pre-shared keys, you would be a symmetric system. So use any traditional test set. I can't say that casually because I know that ASC will handle it and the Triangle MicroWorks. The particular one I played with is the ASC. No way I'm going to go through all the table settings, but if you read the paper, you can see the particular settings that are necessary to do that testing. So one thing to do testing, yeah, you put your keys in and you go through this process, the control works, the data comes back, it's good. We highly suggest you tweak the key on one end. You got to break the key and then see that it does not work as well. And you're thinking, okay, is that the extent of it? It works or it doesn't work? No. We also provide logs. So that can provide a lot of post-mortem information to see what happened and to help you chase down the issues. And plus it can also provide a means of indication that someone has been trying to attack. So we have it's a rather simple interface, a command where you drop display the logs inside the RTU. Those logs are also available by other means, so I can actually pull out the file if need be. So what do utilities need to do? Of course, apply it where necessary. Remember, that's one of the three things I said that's tough for them. The version they'll use, whatever's appropriate, 5 whenever possible. So then they have to decide how are they going to share these keys. And there's a limitation, like I said, in our case, they have to be pre-shared. So you don't have the option of some of those others at this time. Remember, I told you certain parameters need to match on both ends for the key encryption algorithm. So they have to be responsible for defining those properly on both ends, of course, for distributing the keys, and then keeping those things behind a holy wall and safe. When it comes to the D20, don't be fearful of upgrading that as needed to implement the secure version of DNP. I'm not saying it's trivial, but it is not burdensome, and it's a rather short process, very simple. And the great application engineers at GE will hold your hand along the way if necessary. So bottom line, we've got the great tools from Mocana to help us implement this feature, and then we got the great brainiacs like Greg Lamar to create easy tools for you to utilize to implement and to configure those that new application. So 2 minutes, 1 minute. We good? Questions?
So this does require a firmware change to the RTU PLC device in question, yes?
Yes.
Does that mean we need vendor OEM buy-in to support their devices going up to DNP3 SA?
Yeah, and what did you say?
Buy-in from OEMs. if I have a Siemens box, do I need to make sure Siemens has a firmware support for DNP3 SA?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so for your brownfield situation, how many of those older devices, legacy devices, do you think are still being actively supported by their OEMs? Or how many devices just don't have existing OEMs anymore? They've gone out of business or we've moved on?
Oh, yeah, yeah. No, I can't address the aging infrastructure of the other manufacturers' devices. You know, my from-the-hip response would be buy a D20MX or G500 and we'll take care of you.
That's not brownfield, right? That's,
Well, yeah, or an upgrade. Yeah, but, you know, I can only, the D20 world, we can upgrade you and provide that functionality. But I can't address, you know, like another box, what would be required and whether they would support them. Am I missing the question?
Talking about a D20 that was rebadged.
That was what?
Rebadged. They put another
Oh.
company's badge on the D20, am I right?
maybe?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm trying to get a feel for.
Yeah.
The short answer is that Mocana does business with many of the tier one vendors. So they're familiar with us if not using us.
Okay.
The simple answer there would be, let's have a conversation about implementing secure DMP3 on whatever platform we have. Keeping in mind that there are platforms that can't be upgraded, right? They physically don't have the additional ROM space for firmware, right? Or they don't have the connectivity option to be able to take that kind of time to do a repathing, right? You have to go out and manually do that, and whether you're willing to do that or not is up to you. But the short answer there is that we have other partnerships. GE's leading the way on this because they own a big chunk of this, right? That doesn't mean that they're the only ones, obviously. Others do use it, and we can work with them as well.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks.
My pleasure.
One more comment I can add to that. My name is Ron Farquharson. I'm with the DNP Users Group. One more solution, which the gentleman did recommend, is a gateway. So if you have a brownfield situation without upgrading possibilities, then a gateway in front. And a lot of gateway manufacturers are in a better position, especially with a newer product, to be able to support the DNP SA. So, and the other thing I would say as the DNP Users Group president is the way to get this done starts with the requirements document, your specification as a utility, to have that in your requirements document for purchasing purposes going forward. That's where it begins, right? Because it doesn't solve the brownfield issue, but going forward it certainly solves the greenfield and upgrade issues.
That might also come into play when we start talking about asymmetric keys, right? Because, I mean, the big difference here is size. Asymmetric keys are much, much bigger, period, exclamation point. So we're using symmetric keys because they're small, they're fast, they're understood, and as long as you have a secure distribution mechanism for the key sets, that's fine. We can support asymmetric key architectures just as easily as we can support symmetric key architectures. The question is, does the platform have the capacity to use them? And in the gateway model, assumedly that it is a newer gateway system, would have the horsepower potentially to support asymmetric keys.
Is it in the case that's almost a factor of 100? Yeah. More horsepower, yeah.
Yeah, typical symmetric keys are 128 bits and below. Typical asymmetric keys start at 1024 and go up from there.
Andrew West, I chair the tech committee that was spoken about. Thanks for your comments. Some of the slides there showed some of the configuration parameters, and there were several parameters to select. User group members have access to documentation, and we've recently published some app notes with recommendations for how to use those parameter sets, which will help guide you in choosing the options. And it's really even easier than it looked.
And I don't want to, send you all away with a bad idea in your head, but keep in mind that in the not too distant future, all of this is going to have to change anyway. Because when quantum becomes a reality, all of our cryptographic means cease to exist, period. So we're going to be changing things because our current cryptographic capabilities are going to be obliterated by quantum mathematics.